We begin with a question that nations rarely dare to ask. What happens to a society when telling the truth becomes more dangerous than hunger itself? In the late 1950s, China achieved something unimaginable and catastrophic. At the peak of the Great Leap Forward, official grain reports claimed abundance, yet over tens of millions were quietly starving. A nation rising from war and humiliation found itself crushed not by an enemy, but by its own silence. And here's the counterintuitive truth. The famine wasn't just about food, it was about fear. And fear, when institutionalized, can starve a country long before hunger ever does. Welcome back to Nations and Notions, where we explore how history shapes the psychology of nations and how societies rise, fall, recover, and reshape their identities. Today, we travel together into one of the most difficult chapters in China's modern story, the Great Chinese Famine of 1959 to 1961. But we're not here to sensationalize tragedy. We're here to explore something deeper, how national strength is built or broken by institutional integrity, societal cohesion, and the moral choices leaders and citizens make in times of crisis. We'll look at the roots of the famine, the dreams and pressures that fueled the Great Leap Forward, the collapse of communication between the rulers and the ruled, and the silent recalibration of an entire nation's political psychology. Because the legacy of this famine still lingers, not just in China's policies, but in its collective mindset, its approach to stability, and its careful choreography between ambition and fear. Let's step into the story. Chapter 1: A Nation Reborn, a Vision Unleashed. We begin in a nation exhausted by war, foreign occupation, civil conflict, and famine. The China of the early 1950s was a country fighting for survival and legitimacy. Infrastructure was shattered. Hunger was widespread. Social cohesion was fragile. So when the new government launched sweeping reforms, land redistribution, collectivization, massive public works, millions felt hope for the first time in generations. It wasn't just policy, it was a promise of dignity. By the late 1950s, the leadership sought to do the impossible, to transform a vast agrarian nation into an industrial powerhouse in just a few years. This became the Great Leap Forward, a bold, almost mythic attempt to compress centuries of development into one political cycle. On paper, it was a plan for national strength, communal kitchens to share resources, mass steel production to rival the West, collectivized farms meant to maximize output, huge irrigation projects, a unified national purpose. But beneath the slogans lay something else, a system where local officials felt compelled to prove loyalty through inflated success, a state that prized enthusiasm more than accuracy, a political environment where admitting failure threatened not just careers, but lives. And so, a nation marching toward modernity stepped unknowingly toward catastrophe. At the height of the Great Leap Forward, some provinces reported grain yields so exaggerated that they implied wheat was growing taller than people. Communal kitchens, meant to symbolize abundance, encouraged overeating early on until food quietly ran out. In this moment, the dreams of a rising China collided with the limits of its young institutions. Chapter 2: When Fear Replaces Facts. If we want to understand the famine, we must understand the psychology of the system that produced it. In the late 1950s, China's political structure was highly hierarchical. Directives flowed downward, and information flowed upward, but filtered, softened, and reshaped at every level. Local officials were trapped between reality and political expectations. If they reported low yields, they appeared disloyal. If they admitted mismanagement, they risked punishment. If they told the truth, they jeopardized the lives of their families. So they lied, and the lies accumulated faster than the grain. A county would report 2x production. The province bumped it to 5x. At the national level, it became 10x. The state believed there was more food than ever and demanded even higher quotas. We must imagine the emotional weight here. Thousands of local leaders caught in a system where truth was dangerous and obedience was survival. Communities pressured to meet impossible targets. Families watching grain being shipped away while hunger crept into their homes. At the height of political pressure, some villages uprooted crops and replanted them closer together to create the illusion of dense, overflowing fields for visiting inspectors. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was a collapse of institutional integrity. A famine isn't merely the absence of food, it's the absence of honest feedback inside the state. And once fear takes root at every administrative level, a nation becomes fragile, even if it appears strong. Chapter 3: The Human Cost Behind the Silence. By 1959, food shortages had become undeniable, but acknowledging them publicly was still politically risky. The official narrative insisted that the nation was entering a golden age. Meanwhile, rural provinces, where the majority of people lived, were suffering the worst. Families faced impossible moral choices. Do you report the truth and risk a punishment? Do you stay loyal to the collective at the cost of personal survival? Do you protect your family or your position? Do you speak or do you remain silent? Most remained silent. In some villages, grain existed but was locked away to meet state quotas. In others, granaries were empty, yet reports declared historic harvests. Communal kitchens shut down. Rural hospitals overflowed. Entire communities moved into the gray zone between hunger and starvation. Some regions continued exporting grain internationally during the famine to maintain international commitments and political prestige, even as rural citizens starved. This is where the psychological dimension becomes overwhelming. A society built on collective action found itself breaking down at the most intimate level. Communal bonds, once celebrated, strained under scarcity. Trust eroded, not just between people and the state, but within families, villages, and leadership structures. And yet, even in these harshest conditions, stories of resilience emerged. Villagers secretly sharing food, doctors treating patients without supplies, teachers keeping schools open to maintain a sense of normalcy, communities refusing to let despair erase their humanity. In every famine, there is a political narrative, but beneath it, there is a human one, quiet, painful, and deeply revealing. Chapter 4: Learning to Listen Again. By 1961, the scale of the disaster could no longer be hidden. The state began quietly adjusting policies. Communal kitchens faded out. Agricultural controls loosened. Local decision-making slowly re-emerged. Leaders who had pushed unrealistic targets were reassigned or criticized. The changes were subtle, sometimes unofficial, but meaningful. China began reassessing the relationship between ambition and capacity, ideology and reality, unity and truth. The famine had revealed something profound. A nation cannot rise if its institutions cannot speak honestly. In the years that followed, Chinese governance shifted significantly. The leadership became more cautious with mass mobilization campaigns. Data collection improved. Policy experimentation grew more localized, and the political psychology of the state developed a deep sensitivity to instability and social unrest. One of the most unexpected legacies of the famine is this: it made future leaders hyper-aware of legitimacy and societal cohesion. It shaped how they approached reforms, economic decisions, population management, and crisis recovery. The post-famine era introduced some of the earliest internal debates about how rapidly a nation should pursue modernization, a tension that still shapes China's policymaking today. But perhaps the most important shift was emotional, not structural. A recognition, quiet, unspoken, that silence can be deadly, and that the cost of control can grow too heavy for any nation to bear. Memory, responsibility, and the strength to adapt. As we reflect on the Great Chinese Famine, we're not just looking backward, we're asking timeless questions about national psychology, legitimacy, and the fragile bond between the rulers and the ruled. This famine teaches us that, 1. National strength isn't built on ambition alone, but on institutional integrity. 2. Societal cohesion requires truth, even when truth is painful. 3. Resilience emerges not from perfection, but from the courage to correct course. 4. Crisis recovery begins with honesty. And 5. The moral choices nations make in silence can echo for generations. China's journey since the famine has been defined by rapid transformation, global influence, and an ongoing search for stability. But beneath those achievements lies a memory, spoken or unspoken, of a time when fear starved a nation more efficiently than scarcity ever could. This is not just China's story, it's a universal one. Every nation faces moments when ambition outpaces reality, when silence seems easier than honesty, when legitimacy is tested by crisis. The question for all of us is simple. Do we learn to listen? Do we build institutions capable of telling the truth? Do we create societies strong enough to rise from crisis with empathy and accountability? Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found value in this exploration of history, psychology, and the forces that shape our world, consider sharing your reflections in the comments. And as always, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and stay compassionate. There are more stories waiting, and together, we will keep learning.